Howdy peeps, hope you're doing well. So I suppose a bit of a continuation from the last video. There's a couple of things I wanted to just put out there ever so quick regarding toxic behaviours. You know, it's just, sorry, I'm just thinking back, it just makes me laugh. The situation that I was in, right? Well, this other person actually got with one of my friends to try and get back at me. I'm still wondering how that panned out. You got with them just to get at me. That's cute. No, that's real cute. I like that. I was saying about magic in my last video. What was that? A lack of sleep spell? You. Oh my god. It's. I'm sorry. I can't help it. Noobs. Anyway, this video on a more serious note, because obviously I spoke a bit about self-healing and well, no, not sorry, I'll rephrase that: healing and self-love. You know, and it's that thing, right? You know when you, because I was saying, it's like, look, don't think about getting into another relationship, right, until you've done the work on yourself, right? Because you know. And the thing is, it's like, it's not even worth dating. Honestly, it's not. And I suppose the sort of counter side to all of this, something that I've noticed for myself, is I'm very picky about who I spend my time with when it comes to friends, right? And friends of friends, friends that I might not know so well. They might have known them obviously a lot longer, because, you know, whatever the reason. And one of the things that my experience of toxic individuals that really taught me, right? Well, you know how you've got two ears and one mouth. That's a very good way of looking at that, and that whole system. You got two and one, right? So you use these for listening and that for talking. And since you got more of these, you should do more of that. More listening, paying attention to what motherfuckers will be saying, and how they live their life. And now this is the other sort of thing. Whereas I may not necessarily make a judgment on, by a judgment, right? And I'll be honest, I won't necessarily speak my mind of what I exactly think of any given individual's behavioural patterns. I will make comment on them, make no mistake about it. It's like, you know, they tell me that they did this, that and the third, and then they're complaining to me about how bad their fucking life is. It's like, well, look at what you're doing. You're not actually helping yourself. All you're doing is complaining about this, that and the third, yet you're doing all these things that are actually directly affecting the way you're feeling and thinking about the situation now. It's like, you know, I've got to say, it really it winds me up. It's like, can you honestly not see the problem? You really can't see the problem. It's like, man, the problem is you and your behaviours. And it's like, if you want to get better, if you want to like heal yourself in that aspect, you know, if you want a better life for yourself, it takes hard work and dedication. You know, you're not just gonna, if you've got what you know to be, and you might not even want to accept it to be, a bad lifestyle pattern, right? This could be love life, potential for other toxic friends, because, you know, the expression birds of a feather flock together, right? It's kind of a thing, you know, in the same as when I talk about NPDs, narcissistic personality disordered individuals. Whereas they might have a group of air quotes friends, they're not actually friends. They're what we refer to as flying monkeys, for those of us that have been in. It's not a derogatory term. It's like, you know, the Wicked Witch, and, you know, when she goes, fly my monkeys, and that's where it comes from, because she's sending the monkeys out. So, now that probably does sound a bit fucking like I'm taking a piss, but I'm not. But yeah, technically they are monkeys, right? Where the narc will send the monkeys out to find out information about how you're doing in your life, to go back and report it. That's literally where the saying comes from, right? That's why they get called the flying monkeys. You know, it's not that they're great acrobatics in the air or something like that. No. It's just the purpose for the name. So if you've got someone that is particularly toxic in that aspect, potential for narcissistic, you know, any of the sort of cluster Bs, because there's a, personally I'd say that there's a fine line. I mean, if you want to go through the DSM-5, it's probably been updated. But yeah, if you're interested more in the psychology, that's what you want to be looking up. So the DSM, I can't remember what the bloody whatchamacallit stand for. I'm sure it's Data Structure Manual or something like that, to do with the psychology. But if you put in DSM-5 on a Google search, you'll bring it up for you. But the point is you know, you got to seriously look at the people that you're hanging out with, and it's like, look, if you've got to be honest with yourself, and you got to look at their patterns of behaviour, right? This could be anything from, I don't know, excess bad drinking problems, excess bad drug problems. You know, maybe they've got a bit of a air quotes reputation. Now, this is a real difficult one sometimes. They've got a bit of a reputation for not necessarily, what's the actual word? I used to use it all the time, especially when I was doing the old NGTOW videos. What's it called? Can't remember. Basically, when they're sleeping around a lot, right? It's gone. It'll probably come to me in a minute. But they do a lot of that. They do a lot of sleeping around, which, you know, isn't good. You know the saying, your body's a temple. I know it's ironic I'm saying that, you know, but it's, you know, that is part of it. You know, that is why there's so many sort of red pill channels out there that talk about like, you know, body count and pair bonding and how it affects the individual. Now, I think it does affect women more than it affects men, but I think that comes down to the dynamic of just we're built differently, you know. But I think there are exceptions for the guys with that, you know, I think, but you know what, fuck, I'm not even going to go into it here. But the point is, you know, you've got to seriously look at who you're hanging out with. And this is a painful part, because sometimes you've got friends that you've known for 2-3 decades or something like that. You've known them for a hell of a long time. You might have been through an awful lot of stuff together. And you've got to take a look back and think, well, hang on, if I wasn't hanging about with them people, how much of the bad stuff would have I actually gone through? I mean, yeah, sure, you'd have had good times too. But it's like, look, you got to seriously weigh shit up sometimes. You know, what were the actual risks of behaving in a certain manner or whatever, right? And I think that's the sort of hard part. And it's like, the other sort of hard part is as well with that is when you recognise your friends that have got issues, and you want to try and help them. But here's the thing, right? Same as what I've said when it comes down to relationships and stuff like that, like more romantic, intimate relationships. You can't fix the other person. They have to fix themselves. You can help them, you can guide them, you know. At the end of the day, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's another reality that, you know, people really have to face, and sometimes it is heartbreaking. And, you know, I've had to leave out a few people in my life because I literally couldn't. I did everything that I could to help them. You know, everything. And there was nothing that, you know, it just always went back to the same thing. And then I had to make a decision. It's like, well, we're either carrying on this, I suppose, karmic cycle as they're known, you know, and then they're going to, you know, it's that thing. It's like they'll drag you down with them. They will drag you down with them, you know, and you got to seriously weigh up if that's what you want in life. You know, if you want to better yourself as a person, for starters, you're doing it mostly on your own. If you're hanging out with the right group of people and the right group of friends, they've got their head screwed on, they know what they're doing, they know where they're going, they know what they want, you know, they know how to do it. That's what you got to be at. You know, it's not because all the time, all these other people, you got to remember, people don't, you know, especially like I've said, and I'm not saying that people that do this are necessarily narcissists. I'm not saying that. At the same time, it's a similar sort of pattern, whereas they won't be able to like the fact or be happy for you that you're actually doing better in life. And the only way you've been able to do that is by cutting out people in your life. And yes, it hurts, but it's your life, it's your choice, and you've got to do what is right for you. And if you want to succeed, there's sacrifices, man. You know, speaking of sacrifices, and I'm not talking ritualistic or anything like that. There's another sort of thing that I wanted to talk about, which is again more on a personal level, to do with personal healing and so on. And that is the some of you might be aware of the expression that the dark night of the soul. Yeah. Well, if you don't know, I want to tell you a little bit about it. Basically, it's what is referred to in psychology terms as the death of the ego. You know. So, what is ego? Well, for starters, ego is like, I mean, a lot of my friends might see me with my leather jacket and I've got my bike and all of this, and it's like, they're just clothes, man. Let's get one thing straight. They're just clothes. They're just an apparel. I like them. I wear them. Yeah, I get stereotyped for it, but fuck it, who cares? There's my ego not being bothered about what other people think about what I fucking look like, right? Now that's a pretty sort of slim and very small example of the death of the ego, of your ego. You know, the death of your ego is when you realise you come to that point in life, and whereas it's not that you stop caring as such, because I think you do still care to a degree. You know, it's not, because when I say not caring, I think people might mistake what I mean as, oh yeah, let's just go out and be completely ruthless and reckless and, you know, you can point the finger at me and say, oh, well, you said. It's like, no, it's not what I meant. But it's the understanding what your ego is, you know, how you project yourself out to others, the way you behave, the front that you put on, because, you know, realistically, I'm going to have to use an intimate relationship example for this. And whereas, you know, you got someone that they don't want to show their true feelings, right? So they'll put on this big macho bravado, look at me, I'm fucking double hard, blah blah blah, and all this shit, right? Yeah. And you know, the truth is, it's like you start cutting through all that bullshit, you start seeing through that, you look that motherfucker in the eye, and you see into their soul, and you see how, like, and it comes down to a delicate ego. I'm not saying fragile, I'm saying delicate. It's a protection thing. They don't want to get hurt. Now it's like, well, now you could argue, well, oh yeah, well, narcissist. It's like, no, there's a fucking difference. They're evil, right? It's one thing to put on a front of you're this double hard person, because, you know, at the end of the day, ego is also related to your emotions, because you don't want someone to hurt you emotionally. It's a defense mechanism almost, you know. When you go through the dark night of the soul, in fact, I'll tell you what, give me a quick second, I'm just going to Google that for a bit of a better example. Right. Okay, so Dark Night of the Soul, a period of spiritual transformation and growth, which is essentially what I'm talking about here. Essentially the death of the ego, self, and the soul awakening, rebirth. So yeah, exactly that. And this is what, you know, see if I'll just Wikipedia that one quickly. Where's what I want? Oh my god, I shouldn't have pressed that button. That was a bad mistake. Because now I can't find which one it is. Right, here we go. Oh no, that's the actual book. Right, okay, this isn't helping me at all. Okay, screw you. Right, the phrase Dark Night of the Soul is often used informally to describe an extremely difficult and painful period in one's life. And it is. You know, this is, for example, after the death of a loved one, the breakup of a marriage, or the diagnosis of a life-threatening illness, you know. But spiritually, in Roman Catholic spirituality, describes a spiritual crisis in the journey toward union with God. Okay, well, I'm not necessarily referring about union with God. It could be a thing for some people if that's what you're into. Like that described by John of the Cross. What is going through the dark night of the soul? The dark night of the soul is a kind of death that you die. What dies is an egoic sense of self. Of course, death is always painful, but nothing real has actually died there, only an illusionary identity, and that's just the ego is just an identity, you know. And it's a necessary must, I think, you know, because, I mean, look, if you've been in one of these toxic relationships, there's a high chance you're going to go through that. I can tell you straight up, I went through it. I went through it once. And that was an experience. That was an experience. But again, it's something, you know, you come through the other side and you come through changed. And alright, I'm not necessarily relating this to being the broken plate that I was talking about in my previous video. But you come out different and you've got a different sense of self, and you're able to, I suppose, maybe communicate better. Like, if that makes sense, you're able to interpret things on a different level. But, you know, it is something that, you know, you got to go through sometimes. It's at some point in your life, not sometimes. I mean, I suppose if it's happening to you more than once, it's like you haven't learnt your lesson. If it's happened more than once, you ain't learnt your lesson. That sort of thing you only want to learn once, you know. But again, with that, you could argue, I'm going to make my own. I'm going to argue myself here. It's like, no, like, you could be in a perfect marriage union or whatever, right? And then you decide to go your separate ways, and it's the other person that has decided that they're going to go their separate ways, and you're not too happy because you were quite content with how things were. And after all, depending how you conduct yourself, say, like we see the sort of usual thing of sitting out on the wall, drinking, screaming "I love you" at the top of your voice at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, I'm not saying do that. It's not good. You look like a right pleb. No, I haven't done it, by the way. But again, you do end up doing sort of other things similar. You know, it's because it's an act of desperation, because you know, like, you're at your weakest. Now, obviously, if that's not how it panned out, and there was a fight that caused it, you know, there was a bit of unhappiness for some reason, you know, then that's going to be sort of different. You might not necessarily experience the dark night of the soul through that. Not saying that it wouldn't happen at all, but again, it would be circumstantial. And again, I might be wrong. I might be wrong on this one, purely because I don't actually know. But I think I'll use the term modern women, because I think maybe a time ago things were different. You know, women behaved so differently like years ago, and it's like these days it's just gotten out of hand, where it's easy just to go to the makeup shop, buy yourself some more war paint, chuck that shit on, and there you go, right? And it's like, no, that's not an ego death. That's just covering your face in fucking stuff and war paint, right? It's like you're not even dealing with the problem. You're just literally painting stuff over on your face to make yourself feel better. Doesn't help. I'm just saying, to anyone that might apply to being a thing. I'm sure most of my subscribers are male anyway, so I'm sure you don't do that sort of thing unless you're a goth. But that's on you. Anyway, well, I think I've yacked on for about 20 minutes now, so... But yeah, these are all things that I think you got to go through. If you actually want to ascend yourself, if you want to lift yourself up in life, you know, these are things that you're going to have to go through and things that you're going to have to deal with. And the dark night of the soul is it's a solitary thing, right? It's not something you do with, you got all your friends around, because it won't happen then, right? It's that, it crushes you. It crushes you so that you can be like reborn again, and then you learn how to deal with things differently, hopefully for the more positive. Hopefully, depends on the individual, subject to psychological, mental status and so on. So anyway, thoughts, comments and opinions, feel free to jot them down as always. Until the next one, stay cool, stay free, peace out.